Hi, I'm Arjun. In today's session, I'm Arjun, working as Assistant Professor in SAVI Institute of Technology, Bangalore. In today's session, I'm going to talk about Introduction to Tribology and Bearings. Okay, to start with, so what is tribology? Okay, the word tribology, it is derived from a Greek word tribos, which means rubbing processes. And tribology, it is defined as the science and technology of interacting surfaces which are in relative motion, and it is related to subject and particles. Okay, and however, this generally deals with the technology of lubrication and friction control. Okay, it generally deals with the technology of lubrication and friction control and wear prevention of surfaces having relative motion which are subjected to load. Okay, and to have a thorough understanding of the subject, okay, and its application to machines, it becomes necessary to know the many areas. It might be on chemistry of lubricants, okay, it might be contact mechanics, material science, physics of fluid flow, it might be mathematics, it might be mechanical engineering. So it becomes a multidisciplinary in nature. It is actually pretty difficult to understand the tribology. The two main constituents of tribology are friction and wear, and these two, when they are controlled and reduced, that is, when the wear rate is reduced or when the friction is controlled, okay, and when the material is subjected to load, it can increase the overall life of the component. That is how actually tribology works. And again, to continue with, okay, one of the important aspects of tribology is a bearing. Okay, generally, a bearing is a system of machine elements whose function is mainly to support the load. Okay, and whenever it is supporting the load, supporting the load by reducing the friction between the two relatively moving surfaces. The load may be different kind of load. Okay, it can be a radial load, it can be axial load, or it can be a combination of both the radial load and axial load. And mainly, the bearings are classified according to the direction of application of loads. Okay, and if the bearings supports the radial load, okay, then such types of bearings are called as radial or generally journal bearings. Okay, and if the bearing supports a thrust or axial load, then they are called as thrust bearings, and some bearings can support both radial and axial loads, and they are usually known as conical bearings. Forgive me, I have mentioned here as thrust bearings. If the bearings which supports thrust and axial loads, okay, they are called as conical bearings. Conical bearings. Now let us continue. Okay, to continue with this, okay, as I told, there are commonly two types of bearings in practice. Generally used bearings are rolling element bearings and fluid film bearings. Okay, we can have a look at a diagram of a general type of bearing here. So these are ball bearings. Okay, this is our bearing structure. Usually this is a journal and this is a bearing. Usually this journal will be rotating inside this bearing, which is usually static in condition or static in working conditions. I mean to say, these are rolling elements bearing. In case of rolling elements bearing, you can have plenty of types of rolling elements bearing. Even you can have taper roller bearings also. And there are actually, as I told, two types of main bearings which are commonly used in practice. One is so this rolling element bearing, and another one is this fluid film bearings. This rolling element bearings have wider uses in industries because since the rolling friction is usually lower than the sliding friction, lubricants used in rolling elements bearings are usually grease. Okay, and if the two mating surfaces are completely separated by lubricant film, okay, then such type of lubrication can be called as fluid film lubrication, and the bearings which usually operate under this fluid film lubrications are called as fluid film bearings. Okay, and we know that as metal to metal contact is completely avoided by the system of lubrication. Okay, metal to metal contact is completely avoided by the system of lubrication. Okay, these fluid film bearings are lubricated by the hydrodynamic flow, which actually which is generated by the relative surfaces in motion, or because of external pressurization. Okay, and a fluid film bearing, which is operating on the principles of hydrodynamic lubrication, which is supported by its own. Okay, are called as and that particular process is called as hydrodynamic lubrication, and it is also called as self-acting bearing. Such type of bearing is also called as self-acting bearings. Okay, and see, in case of self-acting bearings, the load is supported due to the weighing effect of the fluid caused by the relative tangential motion between the two surfaces. Okay, and we do have another type of bearings called as hydrostatic bearings. Okay, and in an extremely pressurized bearings. Okay, the load is supported due to the pressure in the fluid film, which is supplied from an external source. And again, in addition to these two types of bearings, where hydrostatic and hydrodynamic bearings, okay, there is another class of fluid film bearings. Those are called as squeeze film bearings, okay, which actually supports the load because of because of the oscillating nature. Because of the oscillating relative normal motion. Again, and in case of extremely pressurized and squeezed film, the pressure within the clearance space can be generated without the wedging effect. Okay, the bearings which supports radial load, again they are further divided into different types. Contact angle, based on the contact angle with the journal, say it may be 360-degree bearings, those are called as full journal bearings, and partial bearings in which the contact angle is either 180-degree, okay, and maybe 60-degree partial bearings, 120-degree partial bearings. So these are the different varieties of journal bearings that we usually come across. Thank you.